The deadliest gangs in prison history, inside the most violent groups. The alarms were already screaming when Michael Turner realized the gangs were no longer fighting inside the prison. They were fighting for the whole prison. That thought hit him like a punch to the chest. This wasn't just another fight in the yard, or a beef between two crews on the tier. Something much bigger had started, and he was standing right in the middle of it. He stood in the narrow watchtower above cell block C, hands gripping the rail, staring down at something he had never seen in all his 14 years as a corrections officer. Every gang in Blackstone Penitentiary, some of the most violent groups in U.S. prison history, had gone silent at the exact same moment. No shouting. No threats. No noise at all. Just rows of hard faces turned up toward him, waiting. They were standing together, side by side. Groups that had spent years trying to hurt each other, groups that had spilled blood for colors, for symbols, for corners in the yard, were now shoulder to shoulder like they were on the same team. It went against everything Michael knew about them. These were gangs that were never supposed to be in the same room without 10 guards between them, shields up and batons ready. And yet, here they were in one long line that stretched across the block. The Iron Wolves, the Stone Kings, the Red Line crew, and others all pressed into one living wall of bodies, all staring up at the tower where Michael stood. Their faces were calm. Too calm. Michael knew what angry inmates looked like. He knew what fear looked like. This wasn't either of those. This was something worse, confidence. A steady, controlled calm that said they were not worried about alarms or officers or locked doors. Their eyes glowed under the emergency lights, a red shine on dark irises that made them look almost inhuman. It was as if they knew something he didn't, like they were counting down to an event only they were invited to. And then, at the same time, every single one of them lifted their heads a little higher and looked straight into the tower window. Not at the guards. Not at the cameras. At him. Michael froze. His breath caught in his throat as hundreds of eyes locked onto his. He'd been cursed at, threatened, even targeted before, but he'd never had an entire cell block silently stare him down like a single creature with one mind. The leader of the largest gang, a tall man with tattoos crawling up his neck and jaw, stepped forward out of the line. He didn't shout. He didn't wave his arms. He'd just stare at Michael through the bulletproof glass. When he spoke, his voice came through the speaker system, calm and cold. "It begins tonight," he said. "No yelling. No emotion. Just a promise." Then, as if the prison itself obeyed his words, the entire cell block went dark. The tower lights dimmed, then flickered back. The screens in front of Michael flickered too, the clear camera feeds turning to shaking static for a heartbeat. For a moment, he saw only snowy white noise where there should have been live video of the blocks. Then a heavy metal slam echoed through the building, one gate snapping open. Then another. Then another. Each echo bounced through the prison like a drum. It felt like someone somewhere was walking down a long hallway pressed full of steel doors and unlocking the entire place one door at a time. A chain reaction that had been waiting for the right spark. Michael grabbed the radio, with shaking hands. Training kicked in, even though his heart was racing. "Control, this is Tower 3, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "All gang units are out of formation. Someone's opened the gates. This is a full breach. Repeat, full breach." He waited for an answer, any answer. A voice. A command. A simple copy that. But the radio only hissed with static, loud and useless. He turned the dial, checked the channel, hit the side of the unit with his palm, but it didn't matter. It was like someone had cut the signal out of the air. For the first time that night, Michael felt truly alone. Below him, the gangs that had been standing in one long line began to move. Not wildly. Not like a riot. They broke apart into shadowy shapes, each cluster peeling off with strange, frightening coordination, like they had practiced this moment for years. They didn't rush toward the fences or fight each other. Instead, they moved with purpose, filling certain hallways, blocking certain gates, leaving other spaces clear. Watching them from the tower, Michael realized they weren't just reacting. They were following a plan. That scared him more than any random chaos ever could. He stepped back from the glass, heart pounding. And then he heard the sound that made his heart stop. Footsteps. Coming up the metal stairs behind him.
Slow.
Heavy. Confident. The kind of walk that said the person on the stairs wasn't afraid of who might be at the top. He turned toward the door. The alarms were still screaming, and the red lights spun outside the glass, but up here it felt strangely quiet. His eyes locked on the handle as it gave the smallest twitch. Then, very slowly, the metal handle began to turn.
Michael's throat went dry.
Right before the door opened, everything in the tower went black. The monitors shut off in a single blink. The small overhead light above his head popped and died. Even the glow from the emergency exit sign seemed to disappear. It was like someone had taken a thick blanket and dropped it over the entire room. For a long second, Michael didn't move. The alarm still wailed somewhere out there in the prison, but up here he heard only his own breathing and the faint creak of metal. The handle was still turned halfway. Someone had started to come in. And now he had no idea who or what was on the other side. Earlier that morning, Michael Turner had thought the worst thing he'd deal with today was paperwork. He'd come to work like any normal day, stepping through the huge steel gates of Blackstone Penitentiary with a styrofoam cup of coffee in his hand and sleep still in his eyes. The sky had been pale gray, the kind of color that made everything look flat and cold. The air carried that familiar mix of rust, disinfectant, and damp concrete. Officers walked past him in their dark uniforms, some joking, some yawning, some just checking the time. It felt like any other day in one of America's toughest prisons, until he remembered the briefing. Blackstone had a secret, one that every officer knew but rarely talked about out loud. Inside these walls lived some of the most feared prison gangs in U.S. history, groups that had shaped the deadliest riots, the longest lockdowns, and the most complicated investigations. These weren't just angry men with tempers. They were organized, smart, and patient. They had built power through fear and loyalty. They used secret codes, hidden signals, and quiet messages passed along laundry lines and recreation yards. Michael had spent years studying them, trying to understand their patterns. But even with all that time and all that work, he had never believed they could truly work together. Not until today. He reached the main corridor where Warden Harper was speaking to two new officers. The hallway buzzed with the steady hum of fluorescent lights, the kind that made everything look a little too sharp. When she saw Michael, she waved him over with a look that told him this wasn't a casual chat. "Morning, Turner. You're on gang surveillance duty today," she said. Michael frowned, confused. "I thought that was next week." Harper shook her head. "Schedule changed. We've been seeing a lot of strange behavior lately. Quiet meetings. Notes passed through laundry lines. A few symbols drawn on walls. Nothing illegal yet, but unusual." Michael felt an uneasy chill crawl up his spine. "Do we know which gang is behind it?" he asked. If it was just one group making trouble, that was bad, but at least familiar. Harper shook her head slowly. "That's the problem. It's not just one." The answer hit him harder than he expected. He stared at her. "They're working together?"
She sighed.
"No proof yet. Just a feeling. But I trust your instincts. Keep an eye on everything today." Michael nodded and walked deeper into the prison, his boots echoing through the long hallway. The building felt heavy, like it knew something he didn't. Michael reached cell block C and climbed the steel stairs to the observation deck above the tiers. From here, he had a clear view of 140 inmates in 2 long rows. Each gang had its corner, its claimed tables, its silent lines on the floor. Normally, the air would be thick with noise, men shouting, laughing, arguing, trying to intimidate each other. But today they sat very still, watching, waiting, their heads tilted slightly toward the tower, toward the cameras, toward each other. Michael narrowed his eyes and pulled out his notebook. Something was off. He started logging everything. At 9:12 a.m., the Iron Wolves gang huddled at the far bench, heads bowed close, whispering in a tight formation that blocked any view of their hands. At 9:24 a.m., 2 members of the Stone Kings looked up at the exact same second and stared toward the upper-level cameras, like they were marking their locations. At 10:03 a.m., Michael spotted a folded piece of paper moving across 3 different tables using nothing but handshakes and shoulder pats. Everything they did felt planned, organized,
Practiced.
and no matter how many times he told himself it might be a coincidence, his gut said he was watching the early steps of something bigger. When lunchtime came, Michael walked downstairs to the cafeteria. The second he stepped through the doorway, he froze. All 5 major gangs were seated at different tables, just like usual. But there was something unnerving about the way they moved. They were eating in the exact same order. Forks down at the same time. Cups lifted at the same time. Some glanced to the side, then crossed their arms in identical ways. No one shouted across the room. No one threw food or taunts. It felt less like a cafeteria and more like a rehearsal. Michael slowly approached Officer Daniels, who was watching the room with a nervous, tight expression. "Are you seeing this?" Michael whispered, trying not to draw attention to himself. Daniels swallowed hard and nodded. "It's creepy," he said. "It's like they're following some kind of pattern." Michael leaned in closer. "Have they said anything weird today?" Daniels looked around before answering. "Just one thing. One of the leaders, I think his name is Cole, said, 'The hour is almost here.' Nothing else." Michael's skin crawled at those words. "What hour?" he asked. Daniels shook his head quickly. "I didn't ask. I didn't want to." That answer told Michael everything he needed to know about how uneasy even the guards were feeling. The pressure in his chest grew heavier. Something was coming. He didn't know what, but he could feel it in the way the air seemed thicker, in the way the officers walked faster, in the way the inmates' eyes kept tracking the clock and the cameras. He needed to talk to the warden again.
Soon.
Michael pushed open the break room door and found Warden Harper standing with Captain Riley, the prison intelligence officer. They were both focused on a whiteboard covered in symbols, triangles, circles, arrows, and lines connecting them. "This one," Riley said, pointing, "is from the Iron Wolves. And this one is the same symbol used by the Stone Kings. But they've never used it at the same time." Michael stared at the board. "What does it mean?" he asked. The captain sighed. "That's the problem. We don't know. Our analysts think it might be a countdown. Or a location. Or some kind of message." Warden Harper rubbed her forehead like the weight of the whole building sat there. "Whatever it is, it's coordinated," she said. "And that terrifies me." The room fell quiet for a moment. They could all feel the situation slipping toward something they didn't have a protocol for. Michael took a deep breath. "Do you want me to check the lower blocks?" he asked. Harper nodded.
Yes.
"I need eyes everywhere." So he went. He spent the next hours walking through Block A, Block D, Block F. Different smells, different faces, the same unsettling silence. Everywhere he looked, gang members were watching him. Not talking. Not fighting. Just watching. One inmate, a tall man with cold blue eyes, leaned close to the glass as Michael passed his cell. His voice was low and calm. "You should go home early today," the man whispered. Michael stopped. "Why?" he asked. The inmate smiled, but there was nothing friendly in it. "Because when the lights go out, no one knows who's in charge." Michael stepped back, heart pounding. He knew then something huge was coming. Something deadly. He rushed back toward Tower 3 just as the afternoon sun dipped behind the high walls. Walkie-talkies crackled with nervous chatter. "Anyone else seeing weird movement in Block C?" "Yeah, same in Block D." "They're lining up again. Looks like a formation." "What formation? What are they doing?"